The day Derek Walsh looked Margaret Harlow in the eye and said, "We're moving in a different direction," he was standing in a glass-walled conference room with 17 employees watching through the window. He slid a manila envelope across the polished table and smiled like he was doing her a favor. He had no idea he was handing her a loaded gun. "But to understand how we got here, we need to go back 12 years. Margaret Harlow joined Walsh Consulting Group in the spring of 2012. She was 32 years old, freshly divorced, and possessed of a particular kind of intelligence that doesn't advertise itself. Derek Walsh was 41 at the time, recently named managing partner, and the kind of man who filled rooms with his voice and let other people fill them with substance. From day one, Margaret was the substance. She learned every client by name. Their children's names. Their golf handicaps. Their private anxieties about quarterly earnings and competitive bids. She remembered contract anniversaries 6 months before they came due and renewal windows the way other people remember grocery lists. In the fall of 2014, she took a red-eye flight to Chicago to personally deliver a revised terms package that kept a $3 million deal from collapsing. She was back at her desk by 9 the next morning. Derek accepted all of this as a given. It did not occur to him that it was remarkable. Over 12 years, Margaret did not just assist Derek Walsh. She built him. She shaped his reputation, managed his client relationships, and quietly corrected his errors before they became disasters. She drafted his keynote presentations, negotiated his vendor contracts, and smoothed over more than one situation where his confidence had dramatically outrun his preparation. She never asked for credit. She asked for accuracy, competence, and to be left alone to do the job right. What she did not ask for was what happened in March. Her name was Vanessa Cole. 26 years old, with a business card that read brand strategist and a professional portfolio that consisted primarily of Instagram content for a clothing boutique she had co-owned for 14 months. She was also Derek's girlfriend of 6 weeks, a fact he did not disclose to Human Resources when he approved her hiring paperwork. By April, Vanessa had been assigned the title of Executive Coordinator. By May, she had moved into Margaret's primary office. Margaret's own title, Senior Executive Director, the one she had held for 9 years, had been quietly removed from the internal company directory. Margaret said nothing. She watched. She understood exactly what she was watching. But what Derek didn't know, what Vanessa certainly didn't know, was that Margaret had seen this coming for over a year. It hadn't started as a plan. It had started as a feeling. She had begun noticing the shift in how Derek made decisions. He was hiring for presence instead of performance. He was scheduling meetings based on enthusiasm rather than expertise. She had seen this pattern in organizations before. She knew precisely where it led. So, quietly, she had begun building something of her own. She registered a Delaware LLC in January of that year under the name Harlow Strategy Group. She opened a dedicated business banking account. She had lunch, carefully and professionally, with 2 former Walsh Consulting colleagues who had departed in recent years and were doing independent advisory work. She made no promises. She said nothing improper. She simply kept lines open. By the time Derek slid that manila envelope across the table, Harlow Strategy Group had been a functioning legal entity for 11 months. Margaret signed the severance agreement without a single word. $42,000 for 12 years of service. She accepted it without argument, shook Derek's hand, and walked out to the parking garage, where she sat alone in her car for exactly 4 minutes. Then she drove home and got to work. The document she found at night changed the shape of everything. Going through her personal files she had always kept meticulous copies of, as was her nature, Margaret located a service renewal letter she had drafted 6 weeks earlier for Caldwell Industries. A standard renewal package for one of Walsh Consulting's flagship accounts, worth $9 million annually. Derek had signed the letter. It had never been sent. The renewal window was still open. Margaret was still listed as the primary point of contact on every piece of Caldwell Industries correspondence for the past 7 years. She considered this fact for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Arthur Caldwell directly. Not to recruit him. Simply to inform him, professionally, that she was no longer with Walsh Consulting and that his renewal documents had not been processed through the appropriate channels. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Who is handling it now?" Arthur Caldwell said. Margaret explained, briefly, that a new executive coordinator had recently been brought on board. Another pause. Longer this time. "Send me your new card," Arthur said. "If you have one." She did. 3 weeks later, Caldwell Industries did not renew with Walsh Consulting. They signed a 14-month engagement with Harlow Strategy Group for $1.2 million. And then the dominoes fell. Prime Meridian Tech's VP of Operations, a woman named Denise Fong, had worked alongside Margaret for 9 years. They had navigated 3 contract cycles together, 2 acquisitions, and 1 catastrophic billing error that Margaret had personally caught before it ever reached a client's inbox. When Denise tried to reach Walsh Consulting about a contract amendment in the weeks following Margaret's departure, she was routed through Vanessa twice. The second time, Vanessa misspelled Denise's last name in a formal email thread copied to 3 senior stakeholders. Denise did not call back. She called Margaret. Prime Meridian's account transferred within the month. The Hargrove Family Trust took slightly longer, because their primary attorney was deliberate by nature. He reached Margaret through a mutual professional connection and asked, quietly, whether she had capacity for new clients. The conversation lasted 18 minutes. The Hargrove account, a long-term advisory relationship valued at $11 million per year, formally transferred to Harlow Strategy Group 47 days after Margaret's termination date. By the end of the quarter, over $31 million in active contracts had quietly exited Derek Walsh's portfolio. Walsh Consulting's revenue projections for the fiscal year were revised downward by 63%. But Derek didn't understand the full shape of what had happened until the night of the gala. The Northeast Consulting Excellence Awards were held every November at the Grand Meridian Hotel in Boston. Derek had attended every year for a decade. This year he arrived with Vanessa beside him, handshakes at the door, a reserved table near the front, his confidence visibly intact. Margaret arrived alone. She wore her navy blazer. She said very little to anyone. The Emerging Enterprise Award was presented annually to a consulting firm demonstrating exceptional growth within its first 2 years of independent operation. The presenter read the selection criteria. She opened the envelope. She said, "Harlow Strategy Group." The applause was immediate. Margaret walked to the stage, accepted the award plaque, thanked her team in fewer than 40 words, and returned to her seat. At table 7, Derek Walsh had not moved. He found her afterward in the corridor outside the main hall. His face had gone the color of a man doing arithmetic he desperately did not want to finish. Vanessa stood 4 steps behind him, holding a glass of something she had stopped drinking. "You took them," Derek said. It was not quite an accusation. It was a man trying to locate himself on a map he no longer recognized. Margaret looked at him without flinching. "I notified them that their point of contact had changed," she said. "They made their own decisions." $30 million, Margaret. 31, actually. She adjusted the award under her arm. "Their satisfaction scores are up, by the way. You should see the retention data." His voice dropped. "I want to talk to you about some kind of advisory arrangement. Walsh Consulting could benefit from." "I'm fully contracted through the end of next year," Margaret said. "But I'll have my team send you our rate sheet. We don't offer discounts, but our terms are fair." She smiled. Not with triumph. Not with cruelty. Just completely. Then she walked back into the ballroom. By the following spring, Walsh Consulting had released 9 of its 17 employees. Vanessa's contract ended quietly in February with no public announcement. The firm restructured around a diminished client base and a reputation that had taken on water it could not bail out fast enough. Harlow Strategy Group closed its first full fiscal year with $2.8 million in net revenue and a staff of 6. Margaret moved into a permanent office on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Boston with a clean view of the harbor. She hired 2 of her former Walsh Consulting colleagues who had reached out after the night of the gala. She gave them real titles, real equity participation, and real authority over their work. Derek called one final time in April. He skipped the pleasantries entirely. "I made a mistake," he said. "I know," Margaret said. "I should have seen what you were." Margaret let the pause breathe for a moment. "You did see," she said. "You just assumed it didn't matter." Neither of them spoke after that. "Good luck, Derek," she said. And she meant it. She ended the call. Outside her 14th floor window, the Boston harbor was gray and perfectly calm in the early morning light. She set the phone down, turned back to the contract folder stacked on her desk, and got back to work. Some people only recognize the value of something once it has already walked out the door. Margaret Harlow spent 12 years making someone else's name worth something. When the moment came, she simply redirected that skill toward the one name that had always deserved it. She never sought revenge. She built something better. What would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments.